most people, their biggest regrets in life are the things that they don't do rather than the things that they do.
I was in the arena making decisions.
When you're in the arena making decisions, you expand in ways that you didn't think was possible, and you just never go back to the same shape.
What was it about you and your team that you said, you know what, we have time to figure this out?
Why not us?
Yeah.
I did not have a track record. It was not obvious that I was going to go create this big thing.
I tell my students that, especially in the age of AI, the only trait that differentiates human beings from machines is judgment.
This is the Founder Mindset with Reza Satchu.
The founder mindset is not just about starting a business. It's a way of living. At its core, what it enables a person to do is to do the thing that every human being wants, to have a positive impact on the people that they care about. In this podcast, what we are going to do is meet with some of the greatest founders, some of the people that have had the most improbable journeys, who have lived with the founder mindset.
What does it take to be a founder? Michelle Zatlyn co-founded Cloudflare as an MBA student on a simple, unfashionable bet. Give the product away and make the internet safer for everyone. Today, Cloudflare protects millions of websites and carries roughly a fifth of all internet traffic. Along the way, Michelle became one of the world's rare self-made female tech billionaires.
Okay, welcome, Michelle Zatlyn. Thrilled to have you here. So let me ask you a question. So you graduated here 15 years ago, and I would say that it's not the most likely story that someone who was born in Saskatchewan, Canada, comes to HBS not sure that they're going to found or not, and is now running a business that today powers 20% of the internet.
One of the reasons why I come back to campus or when I talk to burgeoning entrepreneurs is like, look, if I can do it, so can you. I did not have a track record. It was not obvious that I was going to go create this big thing. And so, like, if I can do it, if Matthew and I can do it, so can you. And I think that there's something really empowering about that. We grew up in this small, close-knit community, but my parents always took us to see the world. And that meant long drives to Calgary or Edmonton or Banff or Vancouver or the United States. We took these big road trips. And my parents did that to try and show us what was possible. And when it came to time to go to university or college, depending whether you're American or
we went
Canadian.
to the same, we were both at McGill.
Yes, we were both at McGill. My parents, I got great scholarships to go to the U of S. And my parents said, you can do anything you want, but really you can't go to the school in Saskatchewan. You have to go see something else. If you want to come back, you can, but you need to go see what's the world. And I'm so glad they did. And I think there was a lot of other parents at the same time who were like, does McGill have a program that U of S doesn't? And that wasn't the point. The point was just to expand your horizons and see what else was up there and that openness.
So we talked about this a little bit because in some ways, for you, it was sort of an immigrant experience in some ways, right? Because you were going to a different province where you didn't know anyone. And what I often say is that part of the reason why perhaps people who are familiar with the unfamiliar become entrepreneurs is precisely for that reason. They've actually stepped into uncertainty. They've actually tried things that were different. And many times it's not sort of obstacles, not of their own choosing. Was that is that what openness meant to you? Was this feeling that you could actually go forth in the world with uncertainty? Or what does this openness mean to you?
Not so much that, although I as you describe that, I'm like, oh, yeah, I definitely think that's part of it. But I think it was more just seeing what was possible. I mean, again, it was a different time. The internet was just starting back then. So you were reading magazines and books. Now you have access to a lot more stories without having to leave your hometown, which is incredible. So you can kind of say, wow, that's cool that this person across the world is doing this. I'm going to do it here. Back when I was, in the 90s, that wasn't quite there yet. And so putting yourself in this situation, meeting people, you kind of just expand your horizons and realize, oh, wow, there's so many different definitions of success. I had always done well. I got really good grades at school, always top of my class, won lots of different awards throughout the years. But when I got to McGill, I was like, wow, there was things that existed that I had never heard of before.
So if you reflect back on your childhood, were there obstacles or was there an obstacle that you felt you had to overcome?
I mean, you always have obstacles. I was much more put in the hard work. We were much more a family that committed to things and you put in the hard work. So I played on a lot of sports teams where you show up for practice even if you don't want to. played piano, had to practice every single day. It was just kind of a
So
non-negotiable.
you
Get
saw the
breakers.
value of hard work.
I saw the value, and that was something my grandparents were farmers, and hard work
Right.
is really incredible, like, is important in farming, and they celebrated the people around them in the community in the harsh conditions. It's cold in the winter. It's true, it's very cold in Saskatchewan in the winter,
Yeah.
and this value of hard work, but what it can pay off. And so my family was never scared of that, and like we kind of put that in. I see my parents work hard, and kind of as a family, we did a lot of hard work.
I mean, a lot of people look at hard work and they think to themselves, well, how do I reduce this hard work? It's not worth the hard work. So it sounds like early on in your life, you saw some benefit to actually hard work.
I did see benefit because we were, again, we lived in a time where my parents were trying to give us a better livelihood than they had had and that my grandparents had had. And again, I'm so grateful for my parents to say, hey, we want you girls to choose whatever you can want to do and go do it the best that you can. And I think that's pretty, I'm very lucky to have the parents that I did. They didn't know what entrepreneurship was. They for sure didn't know what tech entrepreneurship was, but they were really supportive of us going to say, "Hey, go pursue a career."
I met your dad. What I think is most remarkable is that it feels to me like the family is as close today as it was back then.
Well, it's so funny you talk about hard work. My dad's in his 70s and he's still working. He works for an entrepreneur. He doesn't need to work, but he wants to. He finds it interesting. He's interested. It keeps him relevant. He be part of something. One of the things that I think is important is like in life, humans really want to be productive and you want to be part of something, I think. And it's like when you feel like what you're doing matters and that you're contributing, that is a really great place to be. And when you feel like you're contributing and adding value, I think that's
Well, I mean, I say it all the time. I think, and we'll talk about the founder journey. I mean, I think at the core, what every human being desperately wants is to have a positive impact on the people they care about.
right.
Right. And that can be sort of your family and it can go all the way to the world. But it's a wonderful thing to actually live a life where you feel like you're having a productive, positive impact. Okay, so you made a decision that I also made at McGill, which maybe was more problematic for me at the time than for you, which was I was supposed to be a doctor. Now you can imagine an Indian son going into medicine and having to call my parents at McGill saying, actually, you know what, this isn't going to happen. I want to go into business. I mean, you did the same thing.
I did.
So what happened there? Why did you make that decision? What led to that?
I did think I wanted to go to medicine because I love the idea of helping people. I think medicine is incredible. I think you solve hard problems. I studied science, chemistry, everything was lining up to go to med school. And in my summers, I did a lot of summer jobs that tilt this risk reward in my favor of likely going to med school. And what was interesting, it was a summer internship where I was working at the hospital in Montreal. I worked for 3 doctors there. I did this research project, and actually, as an undergrad, I ended up winning a master's PhD award. I had done this summer project that turned out to be incredibly successful, and I came home from this incredible moment, this award that I won,
Right.
and I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. Which is a really scary thing where it's like I was so close. Like I was like
I see. So you were
tilting.
sort of at the pinnacle.
I was at the pinnacle. I was like applying to med school, and I was like, actually, for the first time in my life, I actually said, "Do I really want to do this?" Because once you go to med school, well, yeah, because once you go, you're there. You're there. It's hard to deviate from that path. And so I immediately minored in business for the next I declared a minor. I was the only chemistry student at the time to toggle between a lab coat and the business halls, and I love the practical nature of the business side. And so when it came time to apply to med school, I said, hey, I'm going to delay. I'm going to go get a job first. I want to go get some career experience. My parents were like, what are you going to do? Like, it was just one of these things where like, what are you talking about? And it was all in the things like I was really successful in something, but it didn't bring me the joy or satisfaction that it probably should have, given the success that I had doing it.
So it's interesting that early in your life, right? Because what I find with my Harvard students is many of them have got lots of gold stars. They do want to found, but they're very worried that that founding life is going to suddenly lead to far less positive accommodations than they've had, right? But you early on said, okay, you know what? I'm good at this. I'm going to go try something else.
I just had to see where it went.
Right.
And it was hard. I knocked on a lot of doors. It was not obvious. I didn't know what I should do. And I ended up getting a job in business, and it was one of these things where I really liked my job, and I liked the owners of that business treated me very well, but I actually didn't like the field. It was in financial services. And so it was like I loved my job, but I was like not passionate about the content. And then we don't have to go through my whole career, but became this thing where I ended up meeting a tech entrepreneur. Worked at a startup. And I felt so energized by the feeling of having ownership over outcomes. and being like, wow, we are solving problems. And we were a startup, a scrappy startup. There was like 10 of us, and we were beating old established tech stodgy
Okay,
companies.
so let's talk about it because this, I mean, you're effectively talking about agency, like having agency over decisions, right? So some could look at that and say, "Wow, that sounds really stressful," right? Like that's an awful place to be because decisions by their core are risky, right? That's why they're a decision. You may get it wrong,
You might get it wrong.
right? And so, why did you seek that?
Well, I fell in love with it because what I wanted to go into medicine to help people. What I learned in tech entrepreneurship is you can help people at scale
Yes.
by solving these problems. And then you kind of win the hearts and minds of your customers or whoever's using your product. And like, I loved that feeling. And then being in the weeds and making it happen, it energized me. Now, you're right, you make a lot of decisions, you get some of them wrong, and so I call that the scar tissue and the
Yes.
feedback cycle, and I'm always like, stick with it long enough so that you can learn from the scar tissue, so the next time you make the decision, you make a better one, and it's the repeated game
Correct.
that basically
Do
it
you
math
buy into the argument that judgment is effectively a muscle? Meaning the more times you use it, the better you get at
I
it.
definitely think you get better at it.
Yeah.
I think people have different starting points,
Yes,
by the way.
yes. Even making mistakes with your judgment is a positive thing.
Absolutely, because you learn as long as you learn from it.
Yes.
So I think being self-aware to learn and the rate at which you learn
Yeah.
and caring enough of saying, "Actually, I got that wrong. Next time I wanna do it better."
I'm jumping ahead, Michelle, but I have to ask you this question because, of course, how many employees do you have now?
4,500.
Okay. So there's a piece of research that came out of Harvard Business School, which speaks to the point we're talking about, okay, which effectively says that if you look at two sets of people, okay, and you sort of segment them with sort of very similar educational professional backgrounds. One set goes and works at sort of traditional paths, the Googles, the McKinseys. The other set founds and fails. Okay, so forget about the set that founds and succeeds.
Okay.
Okay. What the research shows is that those people that found and fail, when they re-enter the workforce and you adjust for the same similar educational professional backgrounds, they re-enter firms like Cloudflare and others with 2.5 years seniority.
Oh, wow.
So my question to you is does that resonate with you? And if so, why?
It does resonate with me, and it's because doers and builders are the ones creating value in businesses.
So
And
when you recruit or when you're interviewing a failed founder, isn't there some massive stigma or not?
there is, but it's more about what did you learn,
Yeah.
and I think there's all sorts of varieties of founders that don't work out, and there's some that probably don't end up getting a job, but then there's lots where it's like, I learned a lot, I'm
Yeah.
self-aware, here's what I learned, here's what I do differently. That's valuable.
I was in the arena making decisions.
What I always say is like when you're in the arena making decisions, you expand in ways that you didn't think was possible,
right.
and you just never go back to the same shape.
Yeah, right.
And this is back to
Oh, I love that.
professional
Yeah.
development, and you're growing, and how do you keep developing yourself? Like that's it. And so, and you might not like the shape you went back to, so the next time you're like, "Okay, I'm going to change this or
Yes.
maybe deliver it in a different way," and you keep learning so that when you're in that job interview or when you're actually in the situation to make the decision, you step up as a leader and it's like, wow, Reza, you were unbelievable, you just delivered.
Yes, amazing. Okay, so let's go back to your time when sort of it was percolating in your mind that maybe I want to go on this hero's journey and launch something, found something. Okay, so at what point do you recall sort of, I'll call it the call to adventure, okay, where you sort of thought to yourself, maybe you hadn't committed to this path, but maybe it was something you would consider and it could be quite exciting. Okay. And the decision had not yet been made. You had not made the decision whether you'd do it or not. But what was the spark that got you? Because you worked at Google for the summer.
Yep.
And I think it was the middle of the recession. So it was a tough time.
Yes.
But at what point did you sort of, something happen where you're like, you know what, maybe there's another path here?
I had started to work on an independent study in my second year, second semester with my section mate, Matthew Prince. And every month I fell more and more in love with this pursuit. The first month was like, wow, there's a real
And he
problem
was
here.
committed to founding.
He was pretty committed. He didn't like his alternatives. And so he was pretty committed to founding. And so
Whereas you had pretty attractive alternatives.
I was pursuing attractive alternatives in parallel because I hadn't decided yet.
Yes.
And so I was excited to do this independent study, but I didn't do it because I actually thought I was going to start the company. I did it to learn how to pitch to venture capitalists, to get to know a professor better, like some other intangibles, which at the sense made sense at the time made sense to me. But every month I was like, wow, there's a real problem here. And then I was like, oh my goodness, we came up with a really interesting technical solution because there was kind of this interesting shift in the moment of from hardware to cloud services. And then we kind of were like, wow, there's a real business opportunity. So I just kept falling more and more in love with the idea to the point where it's like, I have to see where this goes.
Yeah.
And I got to know Matthew better. We had a third co-founder, Lee, who wasn't on campus, but
Right.
Matthew and Lee had worked together before, to the point where I was like, I have to see where this goes. And I look back and I think, what were we thinking? I cannot believe I moved my life to San Francisco as an immigrant. I really was an immigrant this time. I could stay for a year with
All three of you
OPT.
were sort of outsiders.
Yeah, well, we just had not, we were unknowns. And
Well,
I
let's
think
get to, so just before we get there, so just tell me, I mean, this idea of falling in love with the problem, right? Or sort of, it sounds like that was the first piece of it, which was, okay, there's like a really interesting, big problem. How would you define, what was the early stages of the problem as you define it?
this idea that if you were a small business or anybody putting something online, if you were a big company, there was good solutions, but for the rest of the web, there weren't. And the idea was like everything needed to be fast and safe online. And we were like, could we create a service that actually stops bad behavior and makes everything better?
Michelle, why would you think, I mean, you were not a technologist, okay? You had no deep domain expertise in this space.
Not yet.
Okay. Why did you think that you and Matthew could possibly be the right people to solve what seems like a massive potential problem? Like, how is it even logical that this could be true?
Those are all really good questions, but hard questions to answer. And I think it's like, well, why not us?
Yeah.
Right. And it was our idea. Matthew and Lee had done something before.
Right.
So we had some traction with an initial kind of community to market to. We had some really IP that we developed.
Right.
So we had a founding team.
Yeah.
So we had the start of something. And of course, you're not saying, hey, someone else can also do it, but why not us?
Yeah.
And we just, let's keep seeing where it's going and let's keep tilting the risk reward in our favor. And I like to win. I'm competitive. Matthew, when I sign up to do things, I like to do things at a high level. So like let's go see if we can make
But
this
let's
happen.
just put it, because I think so many founders or so many people who want to found get stuck at this point.
Right.
Which is they have an idea,
Right.
just like you did, or they see a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens is they invariably think that they don't have a right to solve that problem because there are others who've experienced the problem more, who certainly have more resources. I mean, what resources did you have at that point in time?
I mean, a lot of hearts and a lot of grits, a lot of hard work.
There was not a lot of money in the bank
No,
account.
we had
Okay.
no money.
Okay.
We had no money.
So you're sitting there thinking, okay, I've seen this problem, but I have no real. I'm sort of resource constrained, potentially opportunity driven,
Yes.
but resource constrained.
Absolutely.
And so I think many people stop there, right? Because they convince themselves that, well, wait, how can I possibly do this? What was it about you and your team that you said, you know what? We have time to figure this out. And we're not going to be defined by the resources we have, but rather by the opportunity we see.
So and this was my answer to that question. If you asked Matthew, you'd have a different answer. Okay. And this is probably, you probably won't like this answer. And so Professor Satchu would probably slap my hand in your office hours. But for me, I kept thinking of it as a cover. So at first it started as an independent study where I was getting school credit. Like I had to do this to graduate from HBS. Awesome. Yes. Instead of taking a class, let me work on this project. Okay. So that was how it started. And then instead of taking a full-time job when I graduated from HBS, it was like, let's move to California and give this a go. And we entered a VC summer entrepreneurship program.
So you viewed it as incremental commitments, sort of staged commitments.
It made me feel better that YC didn't exist at the time, really. But it was like, okay, if I go out and make more, I work on this for the summer.
Right.
And and it doesn't go anywhere. I could at least said I did a summer at Highland Capital entrepreneurship program. And it was something I could put on my resume and back to, I could go talk about it when I was going to try and get a job, for example, versus just something I was doing willy-nilly on.
See, the awful thing about this is I would miss you in my founder lunch
I know,
class.
that's what I'm saying.
I literally
Well,
would miss
maybe you should
one of our
rethink some of
greatest
your-
entrepreneurs coming out of HBS. I would miss because, of course, my big theory is, of course, there's a curse of optionality happening, which is especially at a place like this where people are sort of collecting gold stars, keeping all their options open, and they don't ever find out what they're truly capable of because they don't commit to something. So tell me,
yes.
how were you able to keep your options open and still build something so significant?
I like this idea of covers, like the cover of, if it doesn't work out, what can I say? And again, for me, like getting a good job after, I wanted to use HBS to move my career forward.
Right.
And I had only worked to Canada at that point. I could only stay for a year under my visa. There was a lot at stake.
Yeah,
Like it was not, hey, like no big deal.
Right.
And I had worked at a lot of great places, but besides my summer internship at Google, I didn't have like a resume that screamed hire me in the US.
And we were in the depths of the recession.
There was something there. And,
Yeah.
and maybe it's back to what my dad said. My parents always said, keep an open mind. I kept an open mind of I have to see where this goes. And again, Matthew and Lee were incredible founders, and Matthew was really committed to it, and that was awesome. We were making great progress. And then at some point, it was like, okay, we're on, game on. And it was
So
during that
talk
summer.
about then. When did you sort of jump? When was it sort of okay? I'm all in.
I mean, I don't know the exact moment, but it was that summer we were out working in the summer, and it was interesting. We were talking to initial customers and hearing the pain points and how excited they were. It was like, of course, we were going to see where this is going. It was something like we were about to raise some money. Okay, this is becoming more and more real. There's no way I'm going to walk away from this. I have to be part of it, and I'd rather be part of it and fail than not even try. Because I think not trying, you live. How about this? Most people, their biggest regrets in life are the things that they don't do rather than the things that they do. So when you're back to this point of, you're right, collecting gold stars, how are you doing, the traction around the way, it's like, but if you don't do this, will you regret it in 5 years? And the answer is a lot of people say yes. So when opportunities present themselves, sometimes you got to go for it, even if you don't have all the information.
I think what people end up doing, and we've certainly seen this with our classmates, is they sit on the sidelines thinking there'll be another opportunity to try, right? Like there's always another day. And so for you obviously at that point calibrated risk and were like, okay, I have enough information here to make this decision.
Yeah. And I went through the worst case scenarios back to like, okay, if this doesn't work, what happens? Okay, I'll get a job. Okay, well, if I can't get a job, I'm going to have to leave the country because, again, I had to get work authorization. Again, there was high risk. Okay, my boyfriend at the time, we had a great job in Vancouver. I'll go move in with him and get a job in Vancouver. Okay, if we break up, okay, I guess I'll move back in with my parents in Saskatchewan. And how funny would it be that I took all these risks in my life, went to HBS, and was living in my parents in their basement? How funny would that be? But I was like, could I live with that?
Yes.
I actually went through that. I said I could live with that.
Yeah.
I would rather try.
Yes. So talk to me about, because of course we met before you were at HBS, and when I look at you, the learning that you've had,
Yes.
okay, meaning, I tell my students that especially in the age of AI, the only trait that differentiates human beings from machines is judgment. Okay. And so to me, as human beings, what we must do is train and build our judgment. Now, judgments happen when you make decisions. Okay. That's where judgments lie.
Yes.
And so as a founder, you are constantly making decisions.
Yes.
Okay. And so you're my poster child of someone who I think has benefited from exponential learning, right? You can go from having managed a couple people to managing thousands of people precisely because of this learning that you're going through. Can you just talk to me how you think about your learning adventure around the founder journey?
So I love that concept of exponential learning. How I've described it, because I get asked this question in ways of like, how do you scale? How do you stay like in the game?
Yes.
And what I always say is the rate at which you learn is a superpower.
Yes, correct.
If you can be a fast learner, it's fine if you get it wrong on the first time, but do you get better at the second time? And by the time you're in the same situation fifth time, are you better at it?
Right.
And so I guess I'm a sponge. When I think back, I guess I am a sponge and have a high rate of learning. And people can learn a lot of things.
But it also seems like, because by definition, decision-making involves uncertainty. So you're not scared of uncertainty.
Okay, so it's interesting about this idea of decision making. You're right. You put yourself in these situations and it's hard. You're making calls or you're like, I don't know if this is going to be right. And some of the calls you don't know they're right for years later. Like it's not like 10 minutes. Like the feedback loop can be fast, or like sometimes it's I'm giving feedback to somebody or I'm trying to let somebody go or hire someone who didn't go well. So then you're like, that's a fast feedback loop. There's other decisions you make where you actually see the outcome 2, 3, 4, 5 years later. So it's slow. And that's why you have to stay in the game. The more you do it, the better you get.
Correct.
The more you trust yourself, the more you get feedback from those around you, both positive and negative. And then at some point, it becomes this thing where you're like, actually, you do start to trust yourself. But then what happens is you end up hiring a team and they're making the decisions, which feels so good. But then all the hard stuff comes to you, all the gray stuff where you're like, I actually don't know what to do. But that's why. But this is one of the things you're like, okay, so it's like you're constantly the journey, the goalposts keep moving. But you kind of have to embrace that. And I think once you're on the journey, you just start to embrace it. And again, I'm not any special person, but I stayed on the field. Matthew stayed on the field. When you have doubt, we had each other to talk to, and there for sure was doubt. And then at the end of the day, it was like the results spoke for themselves. And anytime we made the wrong decision, you could correct it.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the things we say, and I've heard lots of successful entrepreneurs say it in different ways. You only need to get a few decisions right.
Right.
You only need a few really, really
Yes,
right.
yes.
The other ones are okay if you get them wrong because you can
Yeah.
fix it. They don't
Well,
matter.
it also turns out most decisions aren't irreversible
Exactly.
either, right? I mean,
Right.
obviously, if you've got, I mean, Jeff Bezos talks about the two-way doors,
Yes.
the one-way door. You want to make very few one-way door decisions.
For sure.
And so you want to be very thoughtful around that. Whereas two-way door decisions, there's just great benefit to just making those decisions and doing the learning. And you can
Yeah.
always retract if need be. Okay, so tell me about a moment, because obviously you look at Cloudflare and it just looks like straight up and to the right,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, the business has a $75 billion market cap. What would your revenues be on an annualized? A couple of $1 billion?
Yes.
Okay. So by any definition, it's an extraordinarily successful story. But we all know that along the way there were lots of crises. I call them lots of dragons, and it's in those moments where you really learn what you're capable of, you, your firm, etc. So can you talk to me about a moment when you reflect back on Cloudflare where it felt like the stakes were very high, and where where things might have gone differently?
I mean, we have many of
Yeah,
them, so that's
yeah.
just part of, that doesn't make it any easier for those
Yeah.
ahead of behind me, but it's
Yes.
like, that's just
It's part of being a founder.
it's part of being the
Yeah.
founder, and
Yeah.
again, I was always grateful that I had 2 co-founders, that we had each other. Some folks who found by themselves, that's a whole I know lots of others. I guess I'd rather have the right co-founders, I'd rather found by myself than the wrong co-founders, that's even
Yes,
worse,
yes.
but it is nice that we had each other. There was many, and so, I mean, I can give you lots of examples. One is we, w we it was interesting. It was, that summer, we were out working at this VC entrepreneurship program, and it was a big deal to be there, but it was interesting. The program was really centered in Boston, and we were out in Menlo, down
Right.
on Sand Hill Road, and the partners there just weren't that interested in what we were doing, and so the expectation was that we would pitch them for money. But we were really worried that if we pitched them and they said no because they didn't seem very interested, that would be a
I see.
negative signal. So
Right.
we made the decision not to pitch them.
Mm.
And instead we said, we're actually not going to pitch you. We'll come back to you for our next round.
Right.
And so when people would say, what is so the VC you're at, are they going to invest? We're like, oh, we're not giving them the opportunity. So it was our decision versus putting the decision in their hand. Now, if they invested, of course, it'd be great, but we didn't know. And
So
we
that
just
was
didn't, we
a
weren't getting
conscious
the
decision.
positive. It was a
Right.
conscious. So it's a little thing,
Yeah.
but I think it put the risk reward in our favor.
Yeah.
A bigger decision was, this is another fundraising story. We actually had a term sheet at a very high valuation from a very
Was this
well-known.
early on?
It was a couple of years in.
Okay,
So it was a couple of years in.
Yeah.
So less than 5 years after founding, kind of 3-4 years in,
Mhm.
and things were going well, and we were still under the radar at this
Mhm.
point. Okay, we were still under the radar, building. We had a lot of tech to build before we could really monetize and be on the radar. So we were heads down, working very hard.
Yes.
And there was a notable venture capitalist that took note in us and was really excited about what we were working on. It felt so good to have that validation. Kind of this, it was almost like the Hollywood of Silicon Valley wanted to invest in us. And that was like a big deal as outsiders. So you're just like, oh my God, we're living that we're living the dream, like
Yes.
amazing.
Made it. Yeah.
And it was interesting, this particular person who, I'm not going to say their name, they just had different visions. They knew a lot about the space, and they had different visions to us as what we should do with the business around whether we should have the free service or not. They thought we shouldn't. They thought that was a distraction. We felt very strongly differently. And so we were in this situation where we had a term sheet. So you briefed your
Wanted them to
board.
leave.
We'd spent a lot of
Business
time with this investor, and
Yeah.
it was a huge valuation, like
Yeah.
a really high valuation but it had a lot of bells and whistles. So instead of signing the term sheet, we walked away, and we had no alternative.
Wow, that's interesting.
And that's a hard
Yeah,
decision.
that is a hard decision. Did
And
they chase, or did it?
They said
Yeah.
no.
But I guess it was a very hard decision because you didn't have an alternative.
We did not. So we ended up raising 6 months later
Wow.
at
Okay.
half the valuation,
Wow.
but from a better person.
Okay.
And I
So,
would
but there
make
must have
that
been some
decision.
angst in that 6
Of
months.
course.
Yeah.
Well, or we had a lot of money, so not that. But
Yeah.
you just, again, we cared,
Yeah.
and we were self-aware. We're like, this is not. That. It felt like a negative signal, and we're like, but it's the right thing.
Yeah.
And back to, it took months to show that it was the right thing.
Yeah. Right.
And even when we got a better investor, was at a lot lower valuation.
Yeah,
So
so
you
like,
could
why
be
do
like,
it?
or you could question, was that a better outcome? Now, I think long term it was, because you're much more aligned with this investor. It was Brad Burnham from Union Square Ventures. They were terrific. They knew a lot about the internet. helped us with talent, a lot, like fantastic, so fun. And but
Yeah.
it's years.
Michelle, I feel like I've known you for a long time, and I feel like you part of your superpower, which I think you have many, but part of your superpower is you're so relatable to people. I see it in kind of all your relationships, your sisters, you just seem like an extraordinarily relatable person. And so, how have you been able to balance sort of massive success, right? And this sort of stay true to who you are throughout this journey.
So it's so interesting. It's very fitting that we're doing this at HBS. So
Yeah.
actually, when we were on the path, I saw the then dean of HBS speak at Davos. It was a Harvard reception at Davos World Economic Forum, which takes place every January. It was Dean Noria.
Yes.
And he was someone who I thought was quite impressive, did a great job at the school.
Yeah.
And he was saying in front of this group of business leaders who had been super successful. We were still very little at the time. And he how I remember him telling the story is actually most people think leadership comes through in the time of crisis. But how I remember him telling the story is that actually in a time of crisis, most people step up and do the right thing.
Interesting.
The true mark of leadership is what do you do in good times?
Oh, interesting.
Do you let it get to your head?
Interesting.
So I remember really being struck by that.
Yes.
And then the second thing is on the last day of class at HBS, I love how the professors go and give life lessons. You're doing cases all the time. By the time 2 years is up, you've read 7 times.
That's still a tradition. Yeah.
Last day of class, I loved hearing the words of wisdom again. I was a sponge, learning a lot, so starstruck to be here. And I remember one of the professors saying, and at the time I didn't believe it. I had no money. I hadn't been, like, I had done well, but not changed the world well. And I remember one of the professors then saying, hey, look, all of you are going to be just fine. You're all going to do incredibly well in life if you want to. Don't lose touch with reality. If you stop going to get your own groceries, if you stop using public transportation, you will lose touch with reality.
And there's a real cost to that.
And so it was interesting. It was like that kind of last day speech. It was Professor Marshall. He was incredible. He ran this class called Turnaround, Managing in a Turnaround, Managing in Crises. And then hearing the dean speak all those years later. And actually, it kind of really struck with me. And I'm lucky to be around a lot of founders, and some do lose touch with reality, and they almost forget what it's like in the real world. And I just decided I don't want to be that person.
So let me ask a question, Michelle, because I'll ask you this question just because it feels to me like there are so many in my class. I just did this class called Founder Launch. Half of them are women founders,
Amazing.
okay, which is terrific. That would
Awesome.
not have been the case. So tell me whether you feel a burden or a responsibility as being such a successful female founder. You're obviously a remarkably successful founder, but there are very few female founders who've accomplished what you've accomplished. And so I'm curious, because that must be a burden too, because I think people look at you and say, look, if it's possible, she can do it, maybe I can do it. And so there's a real sense of responsibility there from your perspective. So I'm just curious, how do you think about it? What is it? What role do you want to play there? What sort of impact do you hope to have? These sorts of things.
There are so many amazing women in technology,
Yes.
but there are many more men. So we need the women. Come,
Yes.
women, come. Now's a great time.
Right,
There's a
right.
revolution happening.
Yes,
Come,
yes.
join the revolution. I think that I'm excited to hear so many
Yeah.
women are founding. Fantastic. I don't think it's a burden, but I think that has a negative connotation. I don't think that at all. But I do think I've come to realize that people pay attention. I am one of the largest female-founded, publicly run companies today, and there's actually only 2 that have ever been bigger than me.
Is that right?
That's Diane Green at VMware, and then Sandy Lerner from Cisco.
Yeah, right.
And so that's crazy.
Yes, that is.
And
crazy.
so
Yeah.
at one point, I'm like, okay, please,
Yeah.
women, let's go, let's go.
Well, I think you're doing the exact thing that's going to, the reality is this is exactly what needs to happen for others to follow, which is to see that's possible.
I think so. And the other part is I've kind of said, okay, I want to have fun along the way because it is a lot of hard work. There's a lot, I take these responsibilities seriously, like the decisions and the what does that mean for shareholder returns? What does that mean for employees' livelihoods? And so Matthew and I both take it really seriously. Lee, our third co-founder, is no longer in the business because he's really sick, but we take it seriously. We really care. But it's like, honestly, if we can have a whole nother generation of entrepreneurs, both men and women, who look at us and be like, wow, I want what Matthew and Michelle created.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I think that's amazing. And we have people we look up to, and it's like there's more stories of leadership and entrepreneurship that need to be written, and founders. And so all the archetypes haven't been written yet. And I hope that I help create
So tell
new
me,
archetypes.
so I think you are, and I'm seeing
It's
it
amazing.
happen now. And so tell me, I mean, you made the comment that it's 15 years and you celebrated your 15th year anniversary at the same time, same month that Microsoft
Same year.
celebrated their same year
Yes.
as Microsoft celebrated their 50th.
Yes.
And so do you imagine Cloudflare being around for 50 years?
Well, I tell that story because it was this huge thing where I think Microsoft is an incredible company, and last time I checked, 2 trillion, and now I think they're up to 4 trillion or approaching 4 trillion. It's like insane. When I was at business school, thinking, "Hey, you're gonna have a market cap of $4 trillion," would have been like seemed out of
No,
reach.
absolutely.
And so this is back to the goalposts keep moving, and don't limit your thinking. And it's like you don't need to know all the answers, but just put yourself in the game of the position to maybe have that outcome and be
Where
part of it.
where are there some combination of you being really smart and or lucky? These two
Absolutely.
things lead to that sort of thing. Yeah.
1,000%.
Yeah.
And so when they turned 50 in April, I just was like, one day Cloudflare will turn 50. We have the chance to do that. I think we're building something generational that will outlive the founders. And that is maybe the truest,
Yeah.
the definition of success as an entrepreneur I could think of.
Whereby it would continue without you.
Would continue without you. It's a business without you.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, it just was one of those moments. I hadn't thought about that before. And I do that just to help frame both for the people at Cloudflare, the people we're trying to recruit, for myself. It's like, oh my goodness, this is much bigger than me, or much bigger than Matthew. And back to, it's like the impact you make in the world, and it's like creating something of sustaining value.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
But isn't it, because the impact you're having is, I mean, you're impacting all of your employees' lives, right? You're impacting your shareholders. But talk to me about, sort of, as you think about the world, or like Michelle Zatlyn 3.0 or whatever we're in over the next 15 years, what does that impact look like?
Well, our mission at Cloudflare is to help build a better internet. And the internet there's only one. So I would argue it should be capitalized I. We always capitalize the I in internet, even though that has not been broad thing yet, but I think it will. There's only one. There's only one. And the internet is becoming more important, not less important. You think about everything happening in AI, it's all happening over the AI, over the internet. They're not going to build something else. It's going to be over the existing here. And so it's impacting everyone's business and everyone's life.
Yes.
And so policy, decisions, businesses, it's
And
like
Cloudflare's right in the middle of all that.
we have a seat at the table.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
do we solve all of it? Absolutely not. But are we relevant? Absolutely. So you get to be part of really interesting conversations. You get to solve really hard problems. And at the end of the day, I do think a world where Cloudflare exists, the internet is better off than it doesn't. We help make things safer. We make things more fast. We make more reliable. And it's like becoming this place where it can help enable all these businesses. And I think that's pretty darn cool.
So, Michelle, let me ask you my last question, which is, a lot of the people that are watching this, and students, what they're wrestling with is this concept of commitment, okay, committing to something, okay, that they really care about. So, and so oftentimes that's, okay, how do I actually know I've got to a point like you did where I'm going to commit to founding this business, okay, and cut off other options. So if I think about Michelle Zatlyn over the next set of years, and I think about a commitment that you're focused on making across whatever dimension, is there a commitment that you can share that you are thinking hard about, for yourself, whether it be through Cloudflare or personally, that you're excited about exploring whether you can make?
Well, on the professional side, we're definitely on this path of 1 to 10 billion, which is a very specific path on the
Revenue,
entrepreneur in
basically,
yeah,
yeah,
in revenue. And again, there's a lot of things you have to do along the way, but that's really important. And so that's what we frame everything. It's like, hey, we're at 2 to 5, 5 to 10, and then it'll be 10 to 20, 20 to 30. But it's really about how do we drive the business to 10 billion in revenue versus being pulled behind. And we want to be driving the business. We want to go from strength to strength, executing well.
And is there a time frame at which we're trying to achieve that?
Yeah, we've laid out for the shareholders. I don't want to get into trouble, but there's a plan to 5 billion, of course.
And then what about personally?
Personally, it's I want to be proud of the life that I have, and I think relationships matter a lot. So my family relationships, my kids, my husband, my family, my friends, my community. I think that at the end of the day, life is about relationships, and that's something that I care a lot about. That's what I care about. I want to be along the path, be surrounded by people, and be really grateful for those relationships.
Have you heard of something called the Harvard Happiness Project? Have you heard about
Ooh, remind me what that
it?
is.
Let me tell you, because it's right around this.
Okay.
And Bob Waldinger is the head of the center. So basically, what Harvard did was 67 years ago, they took 800, unfortunately just men, 400 graduates from Harvard and 400 from inner city Boston. And so they were all in their early 20s. They're now in their mid 80s.
Mhm.
And they followed them over time.
Mhm.
And so some started high, ended low, some got sick, some all sorts of outcomes. Okay. And they did a study and they said, what is the thing that has most led to your contentment?
Yeah.
Okay. And the single most important factor over and above everything else was, did they have long-term enduring relationships? Like, not money, not power, not prestige, long-term enduring relationships. And, it speaks to commitment, because you and I both know the way you maintain long-term enduring relationships, whether it's with co-founders, whether it's with whoever it may be, is being there in times of discomfort and crisis and staying committed, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's a wonderful thing. I mean, I think this relationship point is key.
Amazing. Pretty cool that we've known each other for 20, 25 years, Reza. So I think that speaks to the power of relationships.
Amazing. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Okay. Great. Thank you.
You've been listening to The Founder Mindset with Reza Satchu.